You're not going to get that far in business when everything is all their fault. You have to be like, okay, but what did I do?
That's what I really enjoyed, though, about the bitch sesh is that it quickly, like, I kind of ran through the playbook of what happened, just gave you the play-by-play, and you go, oh, well, then obviously, like, you need to go figure out, like, what they were told in the beginning. Like, point me to the process that they were outlined. And I was like, oh. I think
first I was like, you sent that in an email?
Yeah, first you were like, Katie, you can't do that.
You can't email that.
I was like, I know. I told you I don't like confrontation. I'm like, I'm so much better in words. I'm like, let me edit. Let me revise. You know, they say women shouldn't be bossy.
We're out here reclaiming that word. What's so wrong with being the boss? Bossy. Okay, Katie, I want to talk to you today about some frustrating things that are going on in work with both of us. For me and for you right now.
Rolls up sleeves.
Let's roll up our sleeves. You know, this conversation that we're having today about setting expectations with people that you work with customers, with clients. Like, this conversation was based on, we had a real phone call maybe a couple weeks ago, and I would call it like a bitching session.
Yeah, I was bitching.
It was two ways. Like, we both had stuff going on, and we were like, what is going on? Why is everybody acting like this? And I think, like, it's super relatable because everybody has had that experience with coworkers, with customers, with whatever. It's just like, what is happening? So I want to talk a little bit about some stuff that's going on with you, and then we can talk about me too for work.
Yeah, let's get into it. So, okay, well, I will preface all of this by saying, now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm happy it happened because I learned 3 really big things that I want to share with you guys. But first, I'll kind of walk you through what happened because it was pretty frustrating.
Give us the tea.
I'll say this all played out over the span of like several months. So it wasn't just like, you know, oh, I had an off week or two. It was like there were months where this frustration was compounding and it finally like reached a boiling point. So basically what happened is something that probably happens a lot if you have a service business, which is like you have a client who you think understands what they're buying from you.
Yes.
And so you start to make the thing that they bought from you.
Correct.
Then you give it to them. And they're like, we'd actually rather do something else. And you're like, well, I already made the thing that you bought. So I fear we're at an impasse.
And also maybe we agreed, or at least you thought you agreed on something. Okay. So in your business, what is it that it's interesting that you call your business a service business. Like it is in a lot of ways. I maybe wouldn't have called it that, but like really all businesses are service businesses.
Yes, you're servicing someone.
You can automate whatever you want. It's still a service business. Okay. So what was it that were you making something for a client in your life?
Yeah, I was making content for a client that like I thought that they wanted. I thought that we were all on the same page. And I think this is liable to happen anytime you have a business where there are a bunch of different teams that are involved in the making of something. And like there's a lot of different cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's where I would say every single time you add another player to the mix, like the chances of a miscommunication probably go up by like 20%.
Yeah.
So we were in this toxic cycle where like we would come up with the plan. I'd think that we were all on the same page. They would come back and like I would hear through the grapevine that they didn't like it or they didn't want it and like we need to redo it. And then I'd think, okay, now's the time that we're getting the better clarity and the better direction, so I'll redo it. And then it just kept happening. And I finally was like, what is going on? Like, what?
How many revisions did you get to where you're like, you're making an ad, right?
I think it was probably, it was a video.
A video,
So
okay.
Talk about the most frustrating thing to have to redo because you're talking writing, filming, production, editing. Like, there is so much that goes into making a video.
And the client keeps asking, like, can you redo it?
Right. And so I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, it feels like this just keeps escalating and I finally just blow up. And I'm like, why are we not managing expectations? Like, why is no one telling them no? Because like, keep in mind, I'm not in any of those conversations. I'm hearing through like 3 people, hey, sorry, it's not working, and then I'm having to get my direction through that same. And so I'm like, where is the line of communication breaking? Why can't we get it together?
So is it true then that you work with these different teams? One of them is maybe like a sales and account management team, and it's their job to communicate directly with the client. It's your job to like produce great content for your audience, and then not occasionally, but when a client wants you to produce something for them, you produce something for them, but you're not like necessarily in every single sales meeting.
I'm in none of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
got it.
And it's not just, I mean, there's, I would say, 2 other groups involved that we didn't even talk about that kind of serve different roles.
Yeah.
And so it was basically just mass confusion across the board. And so
what were you feeling at this point where you were like, because this is where we got on the phone, maybe a little bit later in this process, but you were hot.
I was hot because, this is one of the big things that I learned. This was one of my big takeaways, is that because I had a story in my head, I only saw one sliver of this process, right? I see my sliver. I see the information that has channeled all the way to me, and then my imagination fills in the rest of the gaps.
Yeah.
So rather than assuming positive intent from everybody involved, my imagination goes, oh, no one respects your time. Clearly people don't care that you're having to redo this. Oh, no one's stepping up to like stop this from happening. Right. So it immediately becomes this like story that's way bigger and way more intense.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think is true in these situations is one thing that I ended up talking to my coach about actually is like sometimes emotions are big, not because they require big action or because there's any big thing underneath them, but because it's a compounded emotion. So you feel something enough times, eventually you have this, what would look on the outside like a complete overreaction to something, because you're reacting to everything that is making you feel that way, not just this one small event that like, if it were happening in a vacuum, you could think more clearly and like go ask the right questions. So,
and you were certainly not the only person who has ever felt like a coworker has not respected their boundaries or a client has not respected their boundaries. Like you were not the first person to feel that way. A lot of us have felt this way.
Right.
If you have felt this way, you can come to YouTube and tell us in the comments. Like everybody has this story of just like, ooh, expectations didn't get set, and like maybe you were malintent, maybe you weren't, but either way, I'm feeling real frustrated right now.
Yeah, and so my takeaways beyond kind of like noticing where the story that you're telling yourself is probably diverging from reality, or at the very least is just like assuming poor intent from others rather than like, let me put myself in their shoes and like think about maybe how the position that this person is in.
So I have a question for you. Who were you most frustrated with? Like the team who's doing the communication that works with you?
Literally everyone. Everyone that wasn't me. In my head,
everybody can get it.
In my head, I'm like, I can do no wrong. I am producing these magnificent things. No one understands me. I am the tortured artist. Like, I had a whole thing going. But I think what I learned in the aftermath and what I'm taking from this is I have to get better at setting clear communication and clear boundaries with the people that I'm working with. So let me tell you what that sounds like, because I think it becomes especially important if you're talking about a process where there are a lot of different layers. Like if this process is a little bit like a game of telephone, we can't afford like, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Could we maybe try? No, that is going to get lost in translation. That leaves the door open for people to misinterpret what you mean.
Because then people think like, oh, she doesn't really care. If you say maybe, can we maybe, then the other person's like, well, maybe it's not that important to her. She could take it or leave it. So I'm not going to latch onto that as important.
As opposed to, I cannot deliver that. Here's what I can do. Tell me yes or no if that works.
Woo!
So that's a good takeaway for me, because I realized I went back through a lot of this communication and I realized the way that my team and I are delivering feedback in a lot of cases is really wordy, is really verbose, is really like meandering.
It's giving wishy-washy.
It's giving wishy-washy. And I'm like, no wonder these people don't know what the hell we want. We're basically like writing in full Shakespearean prose instead of being like, that's not going to work. Here's what does work. Like check yes or no.
Yes.
I'm like, we could have eliminated a lot of this, and that's on us, right? And so the other lessons that I learned, though, kind of come down to understanding more about their process, because I think what is easy to forget.
Who's there? The clients or the account management and
sales and how they interface with the clients.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to forget that in a business, each person is managing a different stakeholder's expectations and is advocating for a different point of view.
Yeah.
As the creator, it is my job to advocate for my audience, to advocate for editorial integrity, to make sure that I'm protecting my time. But that's not what a salesperson or an account manager is being tasked with advocating for. They have to advocate for the client. That's their partner, right? Like they have to advocate for the relationship that they have with this person who's bringing revenue to the company. That's literally their job. Their job is not to manage my time. And so that is going to create tension if we're unclear on that. And I think my expectations of them were, well, why is no one stepping in to fix this? And it's like, well, I don't know that I set the expectation with them. And I also don't understand what this client has been told. I can't even be upset with the client. Maybe they thought they got all these revisions. I don't know
someone
what they
told them
told.
unlimited revisions.
Who knows, right? And so after the fact, after I kind of exploded and like
Did you explode?
Yes.
How did you explode?
I sent a very long, very aggressive message.
Yo, you are good at like dropping a bomb
and then just walking away.
And you walk away.
And you told me that. You said, no, dude, you can't do that. You can't drop the bomb and walk away. You got to, should not have been a message. That was a big takeaway, is you cannot send something like that over Slack.
This is a phone call or a meeting. This is a meeting.
Phone call,
this
right?
is a meeting. Yeah,
And
Zoom,
so,
whatever. Maybe you can see my face, know that I'm not like that upset, but we got to get this right. Yeah.
And it doesn't leave room really when you just come at it from like I'm going to unload all of this frustration on all of you.
So what did you put in this email? Like in general, what? You're just
basically
like ranting?
I'm really disappointed with how this has been handled. I feel like I attached a timeline. I was like, this is everything that has happened. I think any reasonable person would look at this and say that like this was not acceptable. And I'm really disappointed with how this has gone down. I feel like my time was disrespected. I don't know where we go from here, but like clearly we need to have a conversation about like how we can fix this, because this is like, we cannot keep doing this. And so eventually—
Did you give in that email, did you end it with, here's what I'd like to happen as a next step? Or you just were like, this ain't it?
I gave a broader in the future. I think that this can be alleviated, but it didn't really pertain to the situation at hand. It was like, to prevent this from happening in the future, this is something we can do. But it wasn't something that was like applicable for the situation we were in.
So it's still kind of giving wishy-washy a little bit at this stage.
Still kind of giving wishy-washy. Yeah. Well, and I think that the thing that's frustrating then for someone on the other side of that is like, you've basically just unloaded all your feelings on me, but like you're not proposing a solution. You're not like giving me a directive now to work with. And so what ended up happening was I basically reached back out to them and got them on a call and like apologized for how I had handled it and said like, I'm really sorry that I unloaded on you. Like, just so you know, or that you have the broader context, like I basically took a lot of frustration that was happening with a lot of different things that were going on, and I basically channeled it all at you.
You said that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I said, I'm really sorry, and I want to understand how you think this happened, because I don't think this has been a good experience for you either, but like, I don't understand. I regret not coming to you with curiosity and asking questions about how we got here. I just made a bunch of assumptions and then unloaded. And so it was great, though. It was a fantastic conversation. I did learn context that I did not have, that did fill in some gaps that I was like, oh, okay, like now I'm understanding how this got so out of whack. But again, because like every time the information was passed along, it lost a little bit of nuance. By the time it got to me, it was just like, yeah, you got to redo it.
When we had this conversation, when you sort of first told me this, I was also going through a similar challenge with my own team around setting expectations. Mm-hmm. And so as you were like telling me this story and you're like hot about it, you were like riling me up because I was hot about something else too. And actually what you're talking about is super common. Like what I was experiencing was, I had gone, and there was this season of business a couple months ago where we just kept having these like issues pop up with customers, where there was some misalignment with what they felt like they were getting and like what features we were going to build for them and what we had thought we were doing or what our process was. And things kept getting escalated to me because like if something is sort of going wrong, I'm sort of like there's a pull me in part of the process. And so I was like, why do we keep having these situations? Like I was getting really frustrated frustrated. And I also was getting super frustrated because sometimes like I get particularly frustrated when I'm like, I don't have any magical fairy dust something I know to resolve a problem that you don't have.
You're like, bring a creative solution to the table.
I got the same brainstorming and problem solving skills you got. So
And
how
your
come
customers that you're talking about, the clients,
Yes.
it was like the people that are buying the done for you kind of like bespoke product.
This is for the agency side of our business. And there was like this misalignment happening that like kept popping up. And I was like, what is going on? And why is it that I'm the only one who can like come in and like resolve it? And like, here's a solution. Like, how come nobody else has any solutions? Like this is like a thing I work on with my therapist where I'm like, how come I'm always the one who has to figure it out? Like, why do I? And some of it is like a story I have. Like, I'm always the one who has to figure it out. But like, this is like a thing that I have. So it was rubbing on that sensitivity.
Yep.
And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go and like, we're going to retrain everybody included in this process. Like, I'm going to go sit down. I actually used to do this when it was my job to hire everybody, which that has changed because now I have like managers that hire their own teams. But when it was my job to hire everybody, what I would do was I would stop what I was doing for 2 weeks and do the job with that person for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I would do it with them. And that was a really great way to like infuse, not just like, here's what you need to do for the job, but like, here's kind of like the Terra style of how we do this. Here's like how we interact with clients and how we like say things and explain things and make it fun. And like that, I actually want to go back to doing more of that because what I learned in retraining everybody was that we were doing there were some gaps in managing expectations. So for our agency, we have this process where like first there's an onboarding meeting. We kind of
Onboarding with the client.
Onboarding with the client. So like we're telling you about our process. Here's how this is going to work. There's like expectation setting. The next meeting is what we call a design meeting. So we ask you a bunch of questions about how you want the app to work and we outline what needs to go on every single page. Right?
Okay.
Then we take that and we build the first draft of the app and we have a review meeting to look at the app. And you can say as a client, I like this part. I want to change this part. You can give your revisions. So then we work on the revisions and then we have a delivery meeting where we take the app and we give it access.
I can already tell how this could go off the rails so easily.
Now, what is known, and after the last step after that is like we pair you with our tech coaches because the thing is we know that, and this is like a common thing people know with agencies and services, that people keep coming up with new ideas, particularly like
scope creep.
Scope creep is what we call it, right? Your client just keeps coming up with, oh, can we add this? Can we add this? Can we add this? And we know that that's part of the process, which is why we pair you with someone afterwards and we'll show you how to make those changes because I like really empowering entrepreneurs to be able to make, the whole point of building the app without code is you can make your own changes.
Yeah.
And so we know that that's part of the process. Like I often say, like if Facebook is still making changes, coming up with new updates to the app, like you will come up with more ideas.
Yeah.
But there's a clear structure of like the revisions we're going to do. So when I started like sitting in meetings, one of the things that I was noticing was like we were not setting clear expectations.
And what did that look like?
Okay, it looked like two things. One, there were scenarios where my team was kind of scared to say no to the client. It was mainly a fear-based thing. It was
Which, by the way, I completely understand that. Like that is something.
Have you ever felt that?
100%.
Yeah.
I feel that way all the time. I'm like, I don't want to, I think I'm a people pleaser for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't love confrontation. Anything that feels like confrontation, I just like, ugh, it just makes me like cringe. But it's a muscle that I'm trying to build. And I do see that. I empathize with client facing people who have to basically be like, I totally get it. I'm so sorry. This is what we agreed to. But I think that's where, are we going down the path of like, this is where the paper trail and kind of like the revision, the outline is important because then you can fall back on, no, see, this is what we agreed on.
Yes, but I think if you agree to stuff that like is not in scope of what we do or you're changing it, then what we wrote down is not that relevant if you're still so fearful that what you write down and you just agree to things that don't make sense. So what you're saying, this is the thing I noticed that I do better than what my team was doing, and this was the thing I had to really like train mostly on. It wasn't like how do we structure the app, the technicals of it. It was like how do we say yes and no to scope. And what I learned is that I actually like the experience of saying, no, actually, we can't do it that way, but here's how we can do it. And the reason I like it, you're looking at me really crazy right now.
I'm going to let you finish. Then I want to ask a follow-up question.
Okay, let me say, the reason I like it is because what happens, I'm pretty good at landing it so that it feels like I'm giving, which I am, I'm giving advice.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So an example might be, I won't go into details, but like there's some ways that clients want to design and organize the app that are kind of dated. Like people don't really build apps that way anymore. So I might say like, instead of doing this like Russian doll system where you like first click on the category and then inside of the category you click on the subcategory and then you click on the next category, what we might do is just have like a filter at the top. One clean page, it'll be a cleaner app design.
Yeah.
What my team was doing was saying, the client was asking for that, and my team was going, okay. Yeah. And it's not like we can technically do it, but it's not inside of like the best practices that we have. And because the person asked for it, they're like, oh, we got to do exactly what they say. What I like about the process of saying no is that you actually gain trust from the client, where they go like, oh, I didn't think about it. That's actually true when I think about apps that I see more new versus older ones. Like they do have that element. And so actually that's okay, I got it. I'm usually better at delivering that, and I'm not scared to deliver it because they hired us. Just like when your clients hire you to make content, they hired you because they like it wasn't easy for them to do. They hired your expertise. Yeah. And so the fear of giving your expertise to the client was what was happening.
So, okay. I think that this works in two ways. I think that it works in the situation you're describing of you are being the expert for the client. I think there is also an application here internally that goes back to what we were talking about in the situation that I was describing. Yeah. Which is the clear feedback of, no, I can't do that. Here's why. Here's what I can do instead and why it's better. Yeah. Yes or no? Like, I think that there is also that delivery works in both situations, and
internally with your team and then externally with the client.
Yes. And I think that that does soften the no, because it doesn't feel like it's not a conversation ender. It's just a redirection as opposed to like, oh God, I'm about to inconvenience them because I'm going to say no to something and they're going to have to figure something else out. 100%. No, they're not. I'm telling you what we can do instead. And it reminds me of, I'm really on this Dr. Becky kick. She's like a parenting psychologist, but you would be shocked at how applicable parenting advice is to like interacting with adults. And one of the things that she talks about is when your kid is throwing a tantrum, they don't want you to give in to what they're asking for. What they really are looking for is a sturdy leader. And so she's like, she uses this example of being on a plane. And she goes, when you're in turbulence on a plane, and you're saying, oh my gosh, we need to land, or we need to do something else, we want to go back, we want to go forward, whatever. You don't want the pilot to give control to someone in the cabin. You want the pilot to say, no, actually, here's what's going to happen, and I'm in control. That's what you want.
You don't want a wishy-washy pilot?
You don't want a wishy-washy pilot.
Have you heard there's a rap song where he says like something like that hoe's wishy-washy? Is like that's what I keep like playing this in my head. Like that's not what we want to be.
I don't know that song, but
I'm going to play it for you.
It did, like that analogy that she used really clicked for me. And now hearing that in reference to what you're saying about, no, this client hired us because we're the experts. And so if they're asking for something that you know is not what's in their best interest, it is actually kinder. It is your job to speak up and redirect them in the direction that you know that they should be.
That's what they're paying for, but you have to deliver it confidently too, though. If you deliver it wishy-washy, it doesn't land. And so what I ended up doing with my team was we made this little, okay, I'm like laughing at myself before I say it. We made this little scorecard.
Oh, of course we did. Of course we have
So I could give feedback. And one of the line items on the scorecard, because what I started doing is I would sit in the meetings, and then once I felt like they were pretty good, I'll just watch the recordings of the meeting. Like you do it on your own, but I watched the recordings and I filled out the scorecard. And one of the line items on the scorecard was like confidently gave yeses and nos. And that was one of the areas we had to work on, because even after we had the conversation multiple times, still it'd be like, well, let me see if I can do that. And it's like, you know the answer to it. So now you're generating a bunch more work for yourself to go look and see, to go see if it's true. Now I have to say, no, you already know the answer to that. Like we just created a bunch of work for everybody when you could have just said, actually, we can't do that, but we can do this.
Yes.
The other thing I had to like make sure everybody was on board with, and this sounds like basic stuff, but like making sure you know how to say no. So I work with a lot of like really, do you know anyone who's like really technical? Like a technical thinker. Okay. So sometimes some of my like developers, for example, are very technical thinkers. And so if you ask them, hey, can we do this? They'll say no. And the answer is not no, but what we can do is this. They just will give you the no.
Yeah.
And then you go like, okay, well, what can we do? And they go, oh, okay, well, we can do all these other things. Like, instead of the drop down being on the left, we just put on the right. It's like, oh, well,
why didn't you say that?
Why didn't you say that? So I really had, so there's that. And then, so I had to really teach my team how to say no. The other, like, way that they were saying no is they were just, like, not couching it with, like, here's how I want to make sure I'm helping you. I want to make sure we get to this role. I understand your vision. I love the vision. We're going to do this. Here's how I think we can make it work. Like, making the no about the part, like, quickly say no and then make it all about the part that you can do. The solution oriented. Like, we have an episode where we talked about, like, the 5 levels of contributing on a team, and, like, the lowest level being like, there's a problem, or like, no.
All the way to
the highest level is like, we can't do that, but I understand your vision. Here's what we can do. And actually, I started mapping out how this would look. What do you think about this?
That piece about vision is important because I think it shows you're listening to them and say, I understand, I see what you're asking for. I think what you're really getting at is you're looking for a better way to XYZ, and here's how I think we achieve that.
100%. Yeah. So I really had to, like, that was the biggest issue, was we were just saying yes to stuff where we really meant no. We weren't doing that. We were being wishy-washy. And there was one more thing that I learned about expectations. So we weren't always setting the expectation with the clients, but speaking to what you were saying about internally, I was not setting expectation with my team really well, because we had this moment where, like, everybody was frustrated, and my account manager said, like, I just feel like I'm not doing a good job. And I asked, like, this is where I kind of, like, leaned into, like, my feminine leadership style. I was like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, forget the results and, like, optimizing for a second. Tell me how you're feeling.
Yeah, and how did that go?
She got really emotional, and she told me, I feel like you're going to think I'm a failure if I say no to a client.
Oh my gosh. And how did were you like, no, it's exactly, I want you to say no.
I was like, it's the opposite. Like, you're the holder of the process. Like, as the business scales, I can't be in every meeting anymore. And you're the holder of this process. And I actually think it's the opposite, where, like, the only time I'm disappointed is where the process got messy and, like, now it's kind of a hot mess and, like, disorganized. I have to come in and reel it back in and like, do damage control. Like, that's when I'm upset. Yeah. It's the opposite of what you're thinking. And she was like, oh, okay. And I think she got that clearly, but we had to have that conversation, and I hadn't done a good job of, like, clarifying. It almost felt given to me, like, as an owner, like, that felt, and I think probably, like, everybody's boss is probably like, maybe there's some things that are given that they have this expectation that you actually be firmer about saying yes or no, and more decisive and more on top of that. And maybe you think it's going to be the opposite. Yeah. But I realized I was almost, like, not being clear with my own team about my expectations.
Yep. I think that's the parallel between the two, is both involved clients that were, for some reason, thinking that they had more leeway than they did, and the level above it, which is the role that we play. And how much of that we tolerate versus being very clear. And
so, you got to take personal responsibility. Entrepreneurship does not work if you're like, it's all them. It was all their fault.
Totally.
Like, you're not going to get that far in business when everything is all their fault. You have to be like, okay, but what did I do?
That's what I really enjoyed, though, about the bitch sesh, is that it quickly, like, even though we were venting, I think I kind of ran through the playbook of what happened, just gave you the play-by-play, and you go, oh, well, then obviously, like, you need to go figure out, like, what they were told in the beginning. Like, point me to the process that they were outlined. And I was like, oh. I think first
I was like, you sent that in an email?
Yeah, first you were like, Katie, you can't do that.
You can't email that.
I was like, I know. I told you I don't like confrontation. I'm like, I'm so much better in words. I'm like, let me edit. Let me revise. But that's where I was proud of myself for actually, like, okay, let me sack up and say this to their faces and really talk about it and apologize for that. But you are good at, and what I'm learning from you and what I observe in other good entrepreneurs, is the ability to go into the emotion or go into the frustration, suss out the information, and then come right back up and do something about it, as opposed to getting stuck in the spin cycle of, well, it's because of them, and, like, they're not doing their jobs right, and no one cares, and everyone's incompetent, and no one respects me, and blah, 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 blah. Like, because you can get stuck in that for months, and it's so easy. But I think what I love about being friends with seasoned entrepreneurs who have been through challenges is that I observe them go, okay, here's what's happening. Here's what we're going to do. And it's fast.
Yes.
It is fast.
It is, I think, a very employee style mindset to get in the spin cycle and be in the motion. Someone frustrated me at work and just be spinning. I think when you're an entrepreneur, we don't have time to spin.
Exactly.
We got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
We got to make sure this business works. Let me pull myself out of the spin cycle and like figure out what was there for me to learn real quick. We got to move quickly. I think the more I think you're right. The more seasoned you get as an entrepreneur, the more you shorten that that period of like, you still feel frustrated.
Yeah.
Trust me. But
I think that what you're hitting on is very true. The difference is that if you are running a business where you are accountable for keeping the lights on, you don't have time.
Yeah.
You have to find a creative solution. And it almost sounds cheesy to say like, oh, you're being solution oriented, but it's almost a matter of necessity that I think it's easy for me in a bigger business to get kind of caught up in all of it without feeling like, oh, but no, there is revenue on the line. Like there are salaries that need to be paid. It doesn't matter if someone was like asleep at the wheel and like let it slip through the cracks. That's irrelevant. Like now
what are we gonna do now?
Do something about it. So I'm curious though, you mentioned that like after the last time we filmed, there was a lot going on, and you went back and you had to start pulling levers to make a bigger impact.
Yeah.
Is this what you mean? Like you were this whole kind of doing people's jobs with them, getting really back in the weeds, getting into the execution and rewatching recordings of meetings and giving really direct feedback. Like, was that a good encompassing description of how that looked for you, or were there other things going on that you had to do?
So in this last season of entrepreneurship, I love this show because we like recorded in batches, so I get to tell you like what happened in the last season. Yeah. So in my last season of entrepreneurship, I definitely had like an intensive execution period of like I'm hands-on, like super in the business. It was, I would say, 40% what I just told you, which was me sitting down and like, let's do the job together. I want to see what the issue is. Let me see it.
Yeah.
I'm going to just sit, like my first meetings, I'm just going to sit in quietly, take some notes, just like sit and join. And then like, let's do it together. Let me show you how I would do it. And then let me pull back and now you do it. Okay, and now let me scorecard it and we can like, I'm off, I'll just watch a recording. That was probably like 40% of what I was doing in this last season of entrepreneurship. And I would say 60% was just like making a couple like clear core decisions we had been like sitting on for a while that I was waffling on. There was like, this is the date that new project will begin. This is the date we will change that thing. Here's when we're going to change pricing. Like those are the things
that feels
like,
good.
Yeah. So I was like a couple decisions, which decisions don't really take that much time to make, but it took a lot of energy for me for stuff I was dragging on. And then the other stuff was getting this expectation setting like fine tuned with clients. So I'm really curious to hear, as people are hearing this conversation, if any of this conversation about being frustrated with coworkers or being frustrated with clients resonates with you and setting expectations resonates with you. So if you can come to YouTube, we can see where everybody is sort of sharing their experiences. Does this resonate with you at all? And maybe share a quick little story, a couple sentences about how it does. We'd love to hear.
Yeah, we definitely want to read the comments on this one.